So now that we've created our enemy, now we need to have some movement for our enemy. So one of the things I want to update here, when we created him, I want to check to make sure to see if he's moving. So maybe we could even do something where we've got so the moving actually is going to be a value of how many spaces or how many seconds he moves in the same direction. So I do want to give him the ability to move around in random directions, but I don't want him to be buzzing back and forth randomly up and down. I want him to make a decision on which direction he's going, travel that direction for a little while, and then once that calculation is up, so there's going to be a countdown on this moving. It's going to go down. Once it hits 0, it's going to reinitiate. It's going to reevaluate which direction he needs to go. And I'm going to add all of this stuff into the rendering function. So here we set up our ghost. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to add in the moving calculation in here just because I want it to reset every time when it hits 0, so it's always going to be the same thing. So what we have is enemy moving, and once it's less than 0, then what I want to do is I want something to happen. And here is where we pick out our enemy moving, and we're going to give it a random value. So we're going to use that mynum again. And maybe we'll pick something like random 30, multiply it by 3. And again, you might have a different calculation that you want to use here. I'm going to add in 10 because I don't want it to go underneath 10. And this should give us roughly a random number for it to count down. Also, maybe I want to change the speed on him. So I'm not just checking it. So I did set a speed of 5. So maybe I want him to have actually a random speed. So he's not always going to be moving at the same speed. So every time he changes direction, there's going to be a possibility that he might change his speed as well. Now also the way that we're doing it here, because I'm placing it within this rendering area, it's going to really move them along quicker. And again, it might have been better to create another function and bring this out, but for now I'm going to keep it within the render. But this is something to keep in mind, that this is going to be a quicker response, because this is going to be run every second as opposed to the person and the key clicks and their movement. So I think a movement of a rough number to 4 or to 5. And then here is where we're actually going to set directions. So I'm just going to set direction equals 0. And I'm going to do direction X and direction Y. So I'm going to set them both to 0. And the reason that I wanted to do that is because going on over here, I actually want to pick out which direction he should be moving, either up or down, left and right. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to take this randomly generated number that I have over here, and actually, come to think of it, I need to probably add in something to either make it odd or even. So I'm going to make it odd or even with that 2 there. So now we can do enemy moving, and if it's modulus, if there's a remainder, then it will do one thing. and if there's no remainder, it'll go the other direction. So the first calculation, so if there's a remainder, and I'll add in the else there as well. So what we want to do, we want to move it left and right if there's no remainder, and if there is a remainder, we're going to move it up and down. So 50-50 chance of the direction that he's going to be taking. And I want to actually take into consideration when I do this calculation, I want to take a look and see where the player's located. And if the player is actually less than my location, then I'm going to send them that way. And if the player is going to be more, then I'm going to send them the other way. So I'm going to do here, I'm going to do enemy direction x equals minus, so from here it's going to actually be subtracting the speed. And else, so another else statement there, and the opposite is going to be adding in the speed. So the direction is going to be the speed value, and then of course this could change. And then here, alternatively, I'm going to do the y's here. So I'm going to change all of these to y. So this should give us direction to go in. And then just before we draw out our enemy, now here we have to add in if the increments. So much like what we did here with the keys, the keyboard, where we added in player, we got to do the same for the enemy. So enemy x equals enemy x plus enemy direction x, and enemy y equals enemy y plus enemy direction y. And one other thing, I want to actually decrease this moving value so that we can reset every once in a while. So roughly whatever this calculation turns out to be, this is in how many seconds they do a reset. And it's always going to be random. And the reason we make it random is so that no one can really determine what the pattern is going to be for the enemy. So I just realized that going back to enemy, I never did set this direction x and direction y. So I do have to add those in before it will work, because otherwise it's just overriding this x and y. So it's not exactly working because I haven't set the object up properly. So going back out here, refreshing it, we see that now it's working properly, where we do have our ghost moving around randomly, and he's actually always moving towards the player. So when I refresh it, again, different ghost, and that movement so if we don't want him actually ever standing still, I can change that random value. Instead of being 5, maybe I can change it +1, so that there will always be one value there that's being returned. And if you notice too, now our ghosts are actually running off the screen. So we have to add in that same functionality that we had in our Pac-Man when we go off of the screen, that he shows up on the other side. So that's coming up in the next lesson.